The boy didn't flinch when he was wagered. He just stood there, arms folded behind his back, eyes like glass over water still, unreadable. The saloon buzzed around him, low laughter, coins clinking, boots dragging over warped floorboards. But he didn't look at anyone, not even the man who claimed to own him. Jed Sloan had seen a lot of things lost in poker games. Horses, rifles, deeds to land that never existed. Once, a man bet his own boots and walked barefoot into the cold. But a boy, that was new. Jed shifted in his chair, chewing the inside of his cheek as he laid his final card on the table. 3 kings. Not much, but better than the two pair held by Emery vexed the man whose face soured like he'd bitten into a lemon. Damn it, Emery muttered. He threw down his cards. The other men chuckled. Half drunk and already leaning toward the next hand, Emery drained the last of his whiskey and wiped his mouth on his sleeve. "Well," he said, voice sharp, "fair's fair." Jed kept his gaze steady. "You said your horse was stabled out back." Emery gave a dry laugh and jerked his thumb toward the wall where the boy still stood. "I'm short the gelding. Traded it to hands ago, if you recall. But the boy here, he's worth more than a horse anyway." The room quieted. Chairs creaked. A breeze pushed through the slatted window shutters. Jed looked at the boy again. Maybe 16. Hard to tell, skin dusted with prairie dirt. Hands tucked neatly behind him like someone trained him not to take up space. "He yours?" Jed asked, flatly. "Found him in Deadwood, working kitchens for less than table scraps. Took him in, fed him, taught him some discipline. He's good with animals. Knows how to haul, brand, even mend fence posts. And he agreed to be part of the pot?" Emery shrugged, eyes glinting. "Boy knows better than to question where his bed comes from." Jed didn't smile, didn't say another word. He stood, slowly, scraping the legs of his chair against the wood, and tossed a few coins onto the table. "Then I reckon the game's over." Emery laughed again, too loudly this time. "You'll take him?" Jed didn't answer. He just looked at the boy. "You got a name?" he asked. The boy finally blinked. "Levi," he said, quiet, almost an apology. Jed nodded once. "Come on then." He turned without waiting, and the saloon door creaked open behind him. Boots clattered as he stepped into the cold night. Levi followed without a word. They rode back in silence. Jed's ranch sat 10 miles east of town, tucked between low hills and flat pasture. The wind moved like breath across the grass, slow and steady. It was the kind of land that demanded work before it gave anything back. Levi clung to the saddle horn, riding double behind Jed. The horse's hooves thudded against the dirt trail, the sound rhythmic, familiar. But Jed's mind wasn't on the road. He hadn't planned on coming back with anything more than sore knuckles and less money. Certainly not with a boy barely old enough to shave. When they reached the ranch, the lanterns were out, and the dog didn't bark. She only lifted her head from the porch and watched. Jed dismounted and turned to Levi. "You ever sleep in a barn?" Levi nodded. "Yes, sir." Jed pointed toward the structure at the edge of the yard. "Hayloft's clean. There's a water pump out back. You'll start in the morning." "Yes, sir." Jed paused. "You hungry?" The boy hesitated. "A little. There's stew left in the kitchen. Help yourself." He waited a moment, expecting the boy to shuffle his feet or ask what the rules were. But Levi just nodded again and walked across the yard, his steps light, almost soundless. Jed watched him go. The kid didn't belong here. But then again, neither did Jed. The next morning broke hard and bright, sun cutting through the last of the frost that clung to the grass. Jed was already up, saddling a mule and checking the southern fence line when Levi appeared behind him, sleeves rolled and hair damp from washing. "You're up early," Jed said. "I didn't sleep much." Jed nodded. "You know how to tack a mule?" Levi stepped forward. "Yes, sir." Jed passed him the bridle. "Then get that one ready. We'll be out all morning." They worked without speaking, mending boards, tightening wire. Jed had half expected Levi to slow him down, but the boy kept pace, worked like someone twice his size, all silent focus and tight movements. By mid-afternoon, they paused near the edge of the property line. Jed sat on a fallen log, canteen in hand. "You from Deadwood?" he asked. Levi took a seat in the grass. Not really. I was just there. Jed didn't push. After a long silence, Levi added before that. I don't know. Moved around. Jed nodded, then passed him the canteen. The boy drank and handed it back. That night, Jed set a second plate on the table. Levi sat across from him, posture straight, eyes lowered. Emery treat you rough? Jed asked after a while. Levi didn't answer immediately. He poked at the beans on his plate. He made me work, kept me fed. But his voice thinned. Sometimes, people aren't mean, just hollow. Jed didn't ask what that meant. He already understood. He himself had lived with silence long enough to know that quiet wasn't always peace. Sometimes, it was a wound with no scar. Jed had always worked alone. Not because he hated people but because being around them made the air feel crowded. Too many words, too many expectations. After his wife died and the last doctor in town told him the truth, he'd already begun to suspect that no matter how many times they tried, Jed Sloan would never have children. He stopped pretending he fit in with the rest of the world. Neighbors quit visiting. The women in town stopped asking about his future. The church no longer sent letters on Sunday. He built fences. He fixed roofs. He stayed quiet. Then the boy came. In the weeks that followed that strange poker night, Jed didn't ask much from Levi. The boy rose early, chopped wood without being asked, cleaned stalls, filled water buckets, oiled saddles, and never once had to be told twice. But more than that, he noticed things. One morning, Jed found a busted latch on the chicken coop mended without a word. Another day, a stubborn mare that hadn't let anyone near her since last spring was standing calmly while Levi braided her mane. Jed didn't ask where the boy had learned to handle animals like that. Some things didn't need explaining, but the silence between them slowly softened. It wasn't the silence of strangers anymore. It was something else, something unspoken, but shared. Late one afternoon, Jed came back from a supply run in town to find Levi sitting out by the stream, sketching in a worn notebook. He didn't hide it, didn't pretend to be doing chores, just looked up as Jed passed and nodded once, as if to say, you see me, and I'm not afraid of it. Jed nodded back. That night, he asked if Levi liked drawing. The boy gave the smallest smile he'd shown yet. I think better when I draw, he said. Makes things feel real. Jed poured him another cup of coffee. 2 days later, the trouble came. It started with the knock, slow, deliberate, knuckles heavy on the old pine door. Jed answered with a rifle in his hand and a quiet frown on his face. It was Hank Brenner, a neighbor from the far side of the creek, and he wasn't alone. Behind him stood Amos Klein, owner of the biggest cattle line in the region, and Walter Rice, the man who'd watched that poker game like it was Sunday service. They didn't smile. Words gone round. Hank said, pushing his hat back, that you came home with a boy. Jed's jaw didn't tighten, but his eyes did. You're late, he said. He's been here almost a month. Amos spit into the dirt. That boy's not family, and he ain't white. Jed said nothing. Walter stepped forward. Folks are talking, saying it ain't natural for a grown man with no kin to keep some teenage stranger in his house. You mean people like Emery Vex? Jed asked, arms crossed. Walter didn't flinch. Don't matter who said it. Matter is, the town's watching, don't like what they see. You came here to gossip? Jed asked. No, Hank said. We came to give you a chance to set things right. There's a boarding school down in Silver Creek. They taken strays. You sign the papers. He gets food, shelter, and God. Jed's eyes narrowed. That's not what they do in those schools, Amos bristled. And keeping him here, what is that? Jed didn't answer. The men looked at him, waiting, demanding. Then Levi stepped into view behind the screen door. He hadn't heard the conversation, but his presence said enough. He stood tall, shoulders square, not hiding anymore, not unsure. Jed turned back to the men. I won him fair, he said, but that boy's not property, not anymore. He's mine, and he stays. Hank's face fell. Then you'll have trouble. Jed didn't blink, then let it come. The men turned and left, no shouting, no threats, but the silence they left behind was heavier than a fist. That night, Jed sat by the fire, rubbing his temples, Levi sat across from him, that notebook open again, drawing something that looked like a hawk perched on a gate. "They want to take me," Levi said quietly. Jed didn't answer. Levi looked up. "You could let them. Would be easier." Jed stared into the fire, eyes glowing like coals. "I couldn't make a child," he said, voice low. "All those years, I blamed myself. Thought I'd be less of a man if I admitted it." He looked at Levi. "But I don't feel less since you came here. I feel like something came back I didn't know was missing." The boy set the notebook down. "I don't know what it's like to have a father," he said. "But if I had one, I'd want him to sound like that." Jed reached over, placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Not hard, not soft, just enough. They'll come back," Levi said. "I know, and they'll want to take me. They'll have to go through me first." Neither said another word. But in that moment, something final passed between them. Not a deal, not a debt, just belonging. The mornings felt colder now, even though it was barely spring. Jed stood on the ridge just beyond the barn, squinting into the horizon where the ground met the sky in a pale blue hush. He could feel it, something creeping in, a pressure behind his ribs, like how animals know when a storm's coming, even before the clouds roll in. The warning came before noon. Clara Bell, the woman who ran the post and seed store in town, showed up on a borrowed mule, skirts dusted, boots cracked with dry soil. She didn't even tie off her reins, just climbed down, handed Jed a folded scrap of paper, and said, "They're coming tonight." Jed opened the paper. No name, no date, just a message scrawled in a crooked, urgent hand. "The boy belongs to the school now. They have papers. They're bringing to deputies, Sunset." Clara shifted uneasily. "Someone tipped off the headmaster, down in Silver Creek. Said you were keeping one of their runaways." Jed's eyes didn't waver from the paper. "He's not theirs," he said. Clara gave a half smile, sad and hard, that never stopped anyone before. She didn't stay for coffee, didn't need to. She'd done more than enough by coming at all. Jed stood for a long time after she rode off. The barn door creaked open behind him. "You heard?" Levi asked. Jed turned. "They're coming," he said. "Said they have papers." Levi stepped into the sun, that shadow of a mustache on his upper lip catching the light like it was trying to prove something. He wasn't a boy anymore, not exactly, but not a man yet either, somewhere in between. "They'll take me," he said. "Put me in a uniform, cut my hair, make me forget the parts of myself I only just started to remember." Jed didn't speak for a while, just watched the boy, his boy now, in the same way he once watched calves just before the branding, knowing it would hurt, knowing it had to be done. But this wasn't the same. This wasn't about ownership. This was about keeping something whole. "They're wrong," Jed said finally, "but they'll come like they're right." He went inside and set the rifle on the table. Levi followed him. What are we going to do?" he asked. Jed didn't answer. "Not yet." He stared at the weapon like it had started asking questions of its own. "I didn't want this life to end with a gun," he said. "Didn't want yours to begin with one." Levi pulled up a chair, sat opposite him. "You told me once you didn't think you'd ever be a father." Jed nodded. "I still remember." Levi reached forward, placed both his hands flat on the table. "Well, you are, whether you wanted it or not." Jed's throat tightened, but he didn't look away. "We don't run," Levi said. "I'm done running." The ranch felt still, unnaturally so. Birds didn't call. The wind didn't rustle the grass. Even the dog stayed curled beneath the porch steps, ears twitching but no bark in her throat. They spent the afternoon boarding the windows. Not to barricade, just to signal something, "We're still here." When the sun finally started bleeding orange across the hills, Jed stood in the yard, arms crossed, Levi beside him. They watched the dust rise in the distance again. Not fast, not a mob, but steady. 3 riders. Toward Deputy Stars. The third was the school man, lean, pressed coat, hat pulled low like he expected trouble but didn't want to dirty his boots to get it. They rode all the way up to the porch, didn't dismount. The taller deputy spoke. "First, we've got legal papers," he said. "Kid matches the description. Says here he was under state custody. You're in violation." Jed didn't answer. The school man cleared his throat. "This is not personal. The boy's presence is causing community concern. You've no right to keep him." Levi stepped forward then, didn't wait for permission. "You're wrong," he said. "I'm not a thing to be returned." The man blinked, clearly startled by the boy's boldness. "You're a ward of the state," he replied. "This rancher has no legal guardianship. You were transferred out of federal care. It's a matter of paperwork." Jed finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "He's not property. He's my son now. If the law's got trouble with that, then maybe the law forgot what it's supposed to protect." The younger deputy looked uncertain, glancing at his partner, but the taller one shifted in his saddle and said, "If you resist, we'll take him by force." Jed stepped down from the porch. And for a moment, no one moved. No guns drawn, no yelling, just a heavy breath caught in the bones of the evening. Jed walked slowly up to Levi, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Go inside." Levi didn't flinch, but he didn't argue either. Once the boy was behind the door, Jed turned back to the riders. "If you cross that fence, you better be ready for a fight," he said. "But I promise you, every round fired tonight will be carved into someone's conscience." He didn't raise his rifle. He didn't have to. The taller deputy hesitated, then muttered to the school man, "We don't have a warrant. That boy belongs to—" "No," the deputy said, flatly. "You want to take a kid from a man like that? You better come with more than paper." They turned, rode back into the dusk. Jed waited a long time before going back inside. Levi sat at the table, sketchbook open again. This time, he was drawing the ranch, but for the first time since he'd arrived, he'd added a figure standing beside the house, hat tilted, rifle by his side, watching the hills like they belonged to him. Because, maybe now, they did. The next morning, the sun rose slow and golden, touching the tops of the dry grass like it was trying to apologize for the night before. Inside the house, everything was still. Levi sat on the floor beside the hearth, knees drawn up, sketchbook in his lap. He wasn't drawing, not this time, just holding the book like something might fall out of it if he loosened his grip. Jed stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the edge of the world the way he always did when his thoughts got too heavy to carry. Neither had said much since the men rode off, but something had shifted in the silence. Not tension, not fear, something quieter, something that hurt more than it should have. "They're not done," Levi said. Jed didn't turn. "I know. They'll try another way. Probably." Levi set the sketchbook aside and stood up. "I've been traded before, you know." Jed turned now. "Back in Deadwood," Levi said, "there was a butcher's assistant, fat man, loud. Said I owed him a debt for eating from his stall when I was younger. Had the saloon owner sign a paper, said I was his now. Took me out to the edge of town, chained me in a supply cart. 2 days before someone came around asking questions." Jed's jaw worked slightly, but he stayed quiet. "The law doesn't care," Levi continued. "Not really. They say they do. They say papers make everything right. But I've been passed like a poker chip more times than I can count." His voice wasn't angry, just hollow, like someone describing a bruise that never went away. Jed stepped forward. "I'm not like them." Levi nodded. "I know. I mean it. You're not just here because I won a card game. You're here because—" He stopped, took a breath. "Because when you showed up, I stopped wishing I was someone else." That made Levi pause. He glanced away, blinking fast. "I don't even know what I am," he admitted. Jed didn't move closer. He just let the boy speak. "I'm not white. Not Apache either. My mother was Kiowa, I think. Or part. She never said. She died when I was 6. No tribe would take me in. The whites called me savage. The others called me orphan. Half boy, half stray." He looked down at his hands. "Then you took me in, fed me, trusted me with tools, with animals, with your silence." Jed exhaled slowly. "You taught me more than anyone ever has," Levi said, voice breaking for the first time. "Not just how to fix a fence, but how to stay still when the world doesn't make sense." Jed stepped closer now, slowly. "You're not a stray," he said. "You're not half anything. You're a whole person, Levi. Whole enough to belong." Levi's face twisted, and for the first time in a long time, tears came, angry, quiet tears that shook him without sound. He sat back down on the hearth, gripping his own arms like the weight inside had finally grown too heavy to stand up against. Jed sat down beside him, just close enough. "You know why I never remarried?" he asked, after a long time. Levi didn't look up. "Because I couldn't stand the thought of raising a child that didn't feel like mine. I thought, what kind of man wants to pretend? What kind of boy would want to be a replacement?" He stared into the fire, but it wasn't about children or wives. It was about fear. "I was scared I had nothing in me left worth passing down." He turned to Levi. "But you showed up, not looking for a home, not asking to be saved, just existing. And suddenly this land started breathing again." Levi wiped his face with the sleeve of his shirt. "I don't want to go to Silver Creek." "You won't. They'll come again." Jed nodded. "And I'll be here." There was another long silence. Then Levi spoke, almost a whisper. "If I asked you something, would you say no?" Jed's voice was low. "Depends what you ask." Levi didn't look up. "Would you call me your son?" Jed blinked once, twice. Then he stood, walked across the room, and pulled something off the mantel. A leather pouch, small, hand-stitched, the kind his wife once used to hold keepsakes. He opened it carefully and pulled out a silver brooch, a longhorn steer etched in the middle. Nothing fancy, just solid, real. He held it in his palm. "This was my father's," Jed said. "He gave it to me when I turned 16. Said it wasn't worth much in dollars, but that it meant I carried something forward." He held it out. Levi stared. Jed nodded once. "I don't need papers to tell me who you are. I know it. And if you want to be my son, then you already are." Levi took the brooch in both hands, carefully, like it might vanish if he blinked too hard. Then he nodded. "I do." Jed placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let it rest there a moment." Outside, the wind had picked up again, but it didn't feel threatening this time. It just felt alive. They didn't come back. Not officially, not with papers, not with deputies and polished boots. But 2 weeks after the last confrontation, a stranger showed up on foot. No horse, no badge, no smile. A man in a long coat with a Silver Creek insignia pinned discreetly to his collar. Jed saw him from the ridge before he reached the gate, watched how slow the man walked, how he carried no weapon, just a folded satchel and a limp in his left leg. He let him approach. "You Jed Sloan?" the man asked, brushing dust from his sleeves. "I am." The man looked around the ranch, noted the repaired barn, the chickens clucking peacefully near the coop, the low murmur of a teenager singing to himself inside the stable. "You got a boy here?" "I do." The man nodded like he already knew. "Name's Harold Price. I run logistics for Silver Creek. We process wards from all over the territory." Jed didn't reply. Price met his eyes. "I'm not here to take him. That a fact. Town council leaned on us, said they were uncomfortable with the situation. But I got ears everywhere, heard about what happened out here, about how that boy stood up, how you didn't raise a hand unless it was to keep him safe." Jed's voice was low. "You came all this way to compliment me." Price cracked a faint, tired smile. "I came to make something disappear." He opened the satchel and pulled out a manila envelope. "Paperwork, transfer forms, list of known runaways and placements. This one here," he tapped the top page, "has Levi's name on it. Says he was removed from custody due to being unfit for institutional care. Signed, dated, and sealed." Jed stepped forward and took the folder. "Read it twice, carefully." Price said, "You didn't get this from me." Jed looked up. "Why?" Price's face softened just a touch. "Because sometimes the system breaks things instead of fixing them, and every so often, someone comes along and says no. That boy earned his life back, and from what I hear, so did you." He turned to leave. Jed called after him. "Why do this? You don't owe me anything." Price paused. 10 years ago, I sent my own son to a federal school. He came back with broken teeth and a limp he never lost. Said they taught him to forget the sound of his name." His voice was brittle now. "I didn't know until it was too late." Jed stood still. Price added, "That boy of yours, don't let anyone take his name." He tipped his hat and walked down the trail, into the heat-humming distance. Never once looking back. That night, Jed and Levi sat on the porch. The stars were out. All of them. No clouds, no moon. just quiet sky stretching forever over the land. Levi held the silver brooch in one hand, the folder in the other. He looked older now. Not in the lines on his face, there were none yet, but in the stillness behind. His eyes, the kind that comes from surviving something and still choosing to stay soft. They're not coming again, are they? He asked. Jed shook his head. Not with papers. Good, Levi said. Because I was ready this time. They sat in silence for a while, dog curled at their feet, wind whispering through the wheatgrass. You ever think about what it would have been like, Levi asked, to raise your own? Jed didn't answer right away. Then, I think about it every day. Levi looked down. Jed continued. But I think about you more. A long pause, then Levi's voice, smaller. You think I'm enough? Jed turned to him, eyes fierce, steady. I think you're more than I ever prayed for. Levi blinked fast, trying not to show what the words did to him. Then I guess we both got lucky, he said. Jed smiled. No, we didn't get lucky. We got each other, and we held on. Inside the house, the lantern glowed soft and warm through the windows. No shadows lingered tonight. No ghosts. Just a people on a porch, one who thought he'd lost everything, and one who never thought he'd be wanted in the first place. Learning how to build something whole from the pieces they'd both been handed. Years later, folks would talk about the Sloan Ranch, about how a man with no blood family and a boy with no last name worked side by side for decades, fixed up horses, bred cattle, hosted strangers with bread and black coffee, and never turned away a soul who looked lost. Some said Jed adopted 100 boys over his lifetime. Others said just one, and that was enough. But those who knew him best said something simpler, that Jed Sloan never needed to make a family, because he already had one.